The first rays of dawn pierced the cracked earth, casting long, brittle shadows over the barren fields. Dust rose in tiny spirals from the parched soil, stubbornly clinging to the edges of the withered crops. In the middle of this harsh, unforgiving land stood a small, humble home, its walls leaning slightly, patched with mud and straw. Inside, the wooden door creaked as it opened, and Ravi stepped into the morning light. Ravi was in his late 30s, with sun-darkened skin and hands roughened from years of toil. His eyes, a deep brown, held a quiet resilience, tempered by worry and exhaustion. Though his body bore the marks of hard labor, his shoulders were straight, his movements deliberate, every step a rhythm of survival. He looked around at the land he had inherited from his father, once fertile and yielding, now cracked and dry. The crops he planted were sparse, struggling against the merciless drought. A thin, crooked scarecrow swayed in the breeze, its torn clothes flapping weakly, as if even the wind pitted the barren fields. Ravi drew a small leather pouch from his belt and counted the few seeds left. His heart tightened. This may be all we have for the season, he thought. Each seed was precious, yet he knew he could not simply hoard them. Every day was a choice between survival and hope. He made his way to the small well in the corner of the yard. The water inside was low, barely enough to quench the thirst of his family. Ravi leaned over, cupped his hands, and drank slowly, savoring the coolness. Even the smallest sip felt like a blessing. After drinking, he knelt beside the fields, examining each plant carefully. The soil crumbled at his touch, dry as sand. He whispered encouragement to the fragile seedlings, speaking as if they could understand his words. Grow. Survive. I am with you. Despite the poverty, Ravi carried a quiet dignity. He never complained aloud, never allowed despair to spill into the small home where his wife and children slept. Yet inside, the worry gnawed at him. How long could they endure the sun's harsh rain? How many more days before the earth gave up entirely? The villagers around him had begun to talk. Some pitied him, some judged him for persisting, for planting when the land seemed determined to resist life itself. But Ravi paid them no mind. His work was not for the applause of others, it was for the land, for his family, for the hope that tomorrow might still bring rain. As he straightened from his knees, a sudden wind swept across the fields, carrying a hint of change, a scent he could not name. For a moment, Ravi paused, sensing something unfamiliar. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it stirred a cautious curiosity in his chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, this land still has more to give. He returned to his home to prepare a simple breakfast for his family. Rice, lentils, and a small portion of what little vegetables had survived the drought. As he served the food, he watched the faces of his children, innocent, trusting, unaware of the thin line between survival and despair. Ravi's lips curved into a gentle smile, though his heart was heavy. Outside, the sun climbed higher, baking the earth with relentless heat. Ravi stepped back into the fields, eyes scanning the horizon. Every movement he made was purposeful, every breath measured. He knew the struggle ahead would be long, yet a quiet determination settled in his chest. Unseen by him, a distant figure appeared at the edge of the village, a solitary silhouette against the shimmering heat. Something about the figure drew the eye, a faint ripple of mystery, a presence that promised change. Ravi did not notice it yet, but the first thread of fate had begun to weave into his life, delicate and silent, like the whisper of the wind through dry grass. For now, all he knew was the hard earth beneath his feet, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, and the faint glimmer of hope that even in the driest season life could endure. The sun hung high, relentless, beating down on the cracked earth. The air shimmered in waves, making the horizon blur like a mirage. Ravi wiped sweat from his brow as he trudged through his fields, checking the few crops that had survived. Every leaf was a fragile victory, every seed a treasure. From the corner of his eye, he noticed movement at the edge of the village. At first he thought it was a stray dog or one of the wandering goats. But as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a man, tall, thin, shuffling along with heavy steps. The stranger's clothes were worn and dusty, his shoes patched and caked in dried mud. A threadbare bag hung over one shoulder, swinging with each unsteady step. Ravi stopped and watched, heart quickening. There was something unusual about the man, not just the weariness in his gait, but a quiet gravity, as if he carried invisible burdens heavier than his bag. The villagers nearby paused too, some eyeing the stranger with suspicion, others whispering rumors about travelers who sometimes stole from their homes or cursed their land. Ravi's instincts battled his caution. The crops thirsted. His family needed water. Every drop was precious. Yet something tugged at him, A moral pull, a quiet voice in his chest that whispered, "Help him. If you can help him." He stepped closer, keeping a careful distance, trying to read the stranger's face. The man's eyes were shadowed, tired, but there was also something faintly hopeful there, a flicker of desperation Ravi recognized. Perhaps hunger, perhaps thirst, perhaps loneliness, it was impossible to know. The stranger stopped a few yards from Ravi, breathing heavily. He looked around, taking in the village in silence as if afraid to speak. The heat seemed to press down on him, weighing him almost to the ground. Ravi approached slowly, heart pounding. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly, his voice almost lost in the dry wind. The stranger said nothing, only lowered his head. Ravi noticed how parched his throat must be, the way his lips cracked, his skin gleaming with sweat. Ravi's gaze fell on the well in the corner of his yard. The water was barely half full, enough for a day if rationed carefully. Every instinct told him to preserve it for his family, but something in him moved beyond fear. He nodded to himself, making a decision. "Wait here," he said, and hurried to the well. The villagers' murmurs grew louder. "Is he giving water to a stranger?" one woman whispered. "In this heat, in this drought?" Another man shook his head. "Foolishness. Foolishness will ruin him." Ravi ignored them. He drew the bucket from the well, the wood creaking under the weight, and carried it toward the stranger. Every step was heavy with tension. The well had barely enough for his family's next meal, and yet here he was, offering it to someone he didn't know, someone the world had abandoned. As he neared, the stranger lifted his eyes. They met Ravi's, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. No words were spoken. Only the silence of the fields, the harsh sun, and the quiet understanding that something delicate, something moral, something right, was happening between them. Ravi lowered the bucket, letting the man drink first. The stranger knelt slowly, cupping his hands to sip the water. Every gulp was careful, almost reverent. Ravi watched, his chest tight, aware that he had just committed an act that might risk everything. His crops, his family, his survival, all balanced on a single choice, a single act of courage. The villagers watched in silence, some in awe, some in disbelief. Ravi's heart pounded, but he did not waver. The stranger looked up briefly, his lips curved in a faint, thankful smile. Yet he revealed nothing else. No name, no story, only the quiet acknowledgement that Ravi's small act of generosity mattered. And in that moment the air itself seemed to shift. A faint wind rustled across the dry grass, as though carrying a promise that this encounter, brief, simple, human, would not end here. Something larger, unseen, had begun to stir. Ravi set the bucket down, stepping back. The stranger drank the last drops, and Ravi's gaze lingered on him. There was fear, yes, but also hope. A sense that even in the harshest seasons, kindness could plant a seed that might grow in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The bucket trembled slightly in Ravi's hands as he lowered it to the stranger. Dust clung to the edges of the wooden frame, and the water inside sloshed gently, revealing just how little remained. Every drop mattered, each one a lifeline for his family and crops. Ravi's throat tightened. "Is this madness?" he thought. "I barely have enough to last until the next rainfall. What am I doing?" Yet he could not stop. Something deeper than reason, an unshakable sense of duty, of empathy, pushed him forward. Compassion, he realized, sometimes demanded risk. The stranger knelt carefully, cupping his hands to drink. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he feared wasting even a single drop. Ravi watched the way the man's eyes closed in relief, and he felt a pang of something unexpected, hope, fragile and bright, threading its way through the heat. The village was silent. Some watched from a distance, skeptical, judging. Others whispered quietly, unsure if this kindness would bring reward or ruin. Ravi paid them no mind. This moment was private, shared only between him, the stranger, and the parched earth. Ravi's mind wandered as he watched the man drink. "I hope this water reaches his heart as it reaches his throat," he thought. "I hope it reminds him that there are still those who care, even in a world that has turned hard and cruel." He knelt beside the stranger, guiding the bucket so he could drink more steadily. His hands grazed the man's, and for a brief moment, Ravi saw something deeper in those shadowed eyes. A story untold, a life burdened with struggle, pain, and weariness. "I don't even know your name," Ravi murmured quietly, almost to himself. The stranger paused, looked up with a faint, weary smile, and said nothing. His gratitude was in the tilt of his head, the soft, unspoken acknowledgement that Ravi's choice mattered. That small gesture, the sharing of water in a time of scarcity, was enough to bridge two worlds. Ravi's heart pounded in his chest. "I've risked everything for a stranger. What if it's not enough? What if I'm foolish? And yet, as he looked into the stranger's eyes, the fear began to fade. There was something honest here, something human that could not be measured in drops of water or bushels of grain. Compassion was its own currency, and in this fleeting exchange, it had value far beyond the immediate cost. The stranger drank the last portion from the bucket, his hands trembling slightly. He stood slowly, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Ravi stepped back, feeling the weight of what had just occurred. His heart was heavy, but it was full as well. He had chosen to act from the goodness of his soul, even when the world might call it foolishness. For a brief moment, time seemed to pause. The wind shifted, carrying the dry scent of earth and the faint whisper of change. The stranger's gaze lingered on the field, on the cracked soil, on the struggling seedlings, and Ravi sensed that the man understood, without words, that this land, though worn and tired, had life in it yet. Ravi lowered the empty bucket, feeling the hot sun on his back, the rough wood under his palms. He had given the last of his well's water. And yet, he felt lighter, as if a small weight had lifted from his chest. He had acted rightly, guided by instinct and compassion, even in the shadow of uncertainty. The stranger turned to leave, taking a few steps toward the horizon, but paused. He looked back at Ravi, a subtle nod in acknowledgement, a promise perhaps, or a silent recognition of the bond forged in a simple, selfless act. Then, as quietly as he had arrived, he walked on, leaving a faint shimmer in the heat of the afternoon, as though the world itself had noticed something extraordinary. Ravi stood alone beside the well, his chest tight with worry and hope at once. He knew the water he had given might bring consequences. His crops might suffer. His family might go thirsty. Yet in the depths of his heart, he understood a truth far greater than any fear. Even the smallest act of kindness could plant seeds of change, seeds the world might one day remember. Ravi returned to his fields, the sun sinking lower in the sky, painting the cracked earth in shades of gold and copper. The water in the well was nearly gone. Every drop he had given yesterday weighed heavily on him now, pressing on his thoughts like a stone in his chest. He knelt among the seedlings, fingers brushing the dry soil, searching for signs of life. Some leaves had wilted slightly, their edges curling under the sun's harsh touch. Have I doomed them? He wondered, a pang of guilt twisting inside him. The villagers had begun to talk. Whispers traveled quickly, like the restless wind rustling the parched grass. Did you see what Ravi did? One man said, shaking his head as he leaned against a fence post. Giving his last water to a stranger. Foolish. Absolutely foolish. A woman added, voice sharp with concern, what if his family suffers? What if the crops fail? He risked everything for someone he doesn't even know. Ravi heard their words but did not respond. Their judgment stung, but deeper still was his own fear. What if the fields cannot survive? He thought. What if my children go hungry because of my choice? He walked slowly to the edge of the farm, eyes scanning the horizon. The stranger had disappeared, leaving only the faint imprint of footprints in the dust. But something was strange. The footprints shimmered faintly in the heat, as though the earth itself had remembered them. Ravi knelt to examine them, heart fluttering in confusion. Is it just a trick of the sun, or? Before he could ponder further, a neighboring farmer, Pranav, approached. His brow was furrowed, lips tight. Ravi, he said, voice low but hard, this is reckless. Giving away water like that, you risk everything. We've struggled enough without adding foolishness to it. Ravi looked up at him, calm but resolute. I could not turn him away, he said quietly. He needed it more than I did, and I could not ignore it. Pranav's eyes narrowed. And what of your crops? Your family? Your farm? The land will not forgive such choices. Ravi felt the tension knot in his stomach. He knew the risks. He knew he had gambled the season's survival on an act of kindness. Fear and guilt wrestled with pride and hope inside him. Was this courage, or foolishness? As the afternoon wore on, Ravi returned to the fields again, checking each plant with care. Then he noticed something subtle, almost magical. The soil around where the stranger had walked seemed different. The dust shimmered faintly as if touched by life, though no rain had fallen. A single green sprout had pushed through the hardened earth where the footprints ended, delicate but unmistakable. Ravi's breath caught. Could it be possible? Could the land itself remember acts of generosity? His heart ached with wonder and confusion. He knelt, brushing the small sprout with tender fingers. Perhaps there is more to this world than struggle and scarcity, he thought. Perhaps kindness leaves a mark deeper than we can see. The village continued its murmurs, some critical, some quietly admiring. Ravi worked through the tension, tending his plants carefully, hoping that the seeds of compassion he had sown might yield more than just water. By evening, he returned home, shoulders heavy with worry, but a faint glimmer of hope lingered in his chest. He poured a small measure of water for his children and wife, watching them drink. The scarcity still pressed against him, but he felt something new, the fragile belief that courage and kindness, even when risky, could be repaid in ways the eye could not yet see. As night fell, Ravi stepped outside once more. The footprints of the stranger still remained, etched in the dust and moonlight, quiet and permanent. The land seemed to whisper softly, as if acknowledging the choice he had made. For the first time in many long dry days, Ravi felt the weight in his heart ease just slightly. He did not know what the future would bring, nor how the land would respond, but he understood this. Every act of generosity, no matter how small, left a memory. And some memories, perhaps even the memory of a single shared cup of water, could grow stronger than the harshest drought. The village was quiet, bathed in the pale light of dawn. Ravi stepped into his fields, noting the subtle changes. The seedlings were holding on, fragile but alive. He had tended them carefully, rationing water and hope alike. Still, worry clung to him like a shadow. As he inspected the soil, a familiar silhouette appeared at the horizon, moving slowly but purposefully toward the village. Ravi's heart leapt. It was the stranger, the same weary figure who had taken the water weeks ago, whose presence had left both doubt and wonder in its wake. The stranger's clothes were still worn, but there was a steadiness in his step now, a quiet purpose that had been absent before. He carried a small bundle, wrapped in cloth, clinking faintly with the sound of seeds or tools. Ravi's chest tightened with anticipation. As he returned for revenge, for gratitude, or for something else? The villagers began to notice him too. Some murmured nervously, wary of strangers, while others glanced at Ravi, remembering the first act of generosity. But Ravi did not hesitate. He moved toward the stranger, each step measured, the dry soil cracking beneath his feet. "Welcome back," Ravi said softly. His voice carried warmth, but beneath it was a cautious curiosity. The stranger stopped a few paces away and carefully placed the bundle on the ground. He looked around at the fields, at the struggling crops, and then at Ravi. His eyes held a quiet intensity, and for the first time Ravi felt that the man understood the land itself, its pain, its potential, its memory. From the bundle, the stranger revealed a small collection of seeds, unusual and vibrant, unlike anything Ravi had planted before. Alongside them were tools, simple, effective, designed to conserve water and protect fragile soil. The stranger gestured toward the fields, then spoke softly, his words deliberate, heavy with meaning. "These seeds remember care," he said. "Plant them gently. Tend them with patience. The land holds the memory of those who act with kindness. It will respond if you listen and nurture." Ravi's hands trembled as he accepted the seeds. Memory, the land remembers. The words echoed in his mind, stirring a sense of awe and hope he had not felt in weeks. He looked at the stranger, searching for more answers. The man continued, sharing stories of faraway places, lands where generosity had transformed communities, where small acts had left lasting imprints on both people and soil. Ravi listened, absorbing every word, feeling the weight of his own choices lift slightly under the presence of wisdom. I do not understand everything," Ravi admitted, "but I feel something is changing. Even a little." The stranger nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. "Change always begins with a single act. You have begun it already. Now nurture it and it will grow beyond what you can see." Ravi looked over his fields, then down at the soil where the stranger had first walked. The faint shimmer of life that had appeared weeks ago still lingered subtly. He felt a surge of determination. This was no longer just about survival. This was about hope, responsibility, and the quiet power of compassion. The villagers watched, some in disbelief, some in cautious admiration. They could not yet see the results, but the presence of the stranger and the guidance he offered planted something in them as well, a seed of curiosity, a quiet wonder at the possibilities of generosity. Ravi knelt in the soil, carefully planting the new seeds. Each one was placed with care, water rationed, soil gently pressed over them. As he worked, he felt the strange, subtle connection between his hands, the earth, and the lessons the stranger had brought. For the first time in weeks, he believed that the land might truly remember, and that kindness could grow into something far greater than scarcity or fear. The stranger stood quietly watching. When his purpose here was complete, he nodded once and began to walk toward the horizon, fading into the soft morning haze. Ravi did not speak. Words were not needed. He had received what mattered most: guidance, hope, and the knowledge that his small act of selflessness had set something profound into motion. The sun rose softly over the village, painting the cracked fields in gentle gold. Ravi moved through his farm with a sense of purpose he had not felt in months. The soil was still dry, the wind still harsh, but the seeds the stranger had brought now rested securely in carefully tended rows. He knelt among them, patting the soil over each tiny sprout. The plants were small, but they were alive, stronger than before, stretching toward the light. Water rationing remained critical, but Ravi had learned to channel every drop efficiently, digging shallow trenches to catch even the smallest moisture, using the tools the stranger had left behind. The land remembers, he thought again, recalling the stranger's words. And now it seemed to respond. Tiny sprouts had begun to push through hardened dirt where nothing had grown before. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and Ravi felt a thrill of hope he had thought lost. The villagers noticed too. At first, some were skeptical, whispering doubts. Ravi's luck, or foolishness? They asked. Nothing will grow in this season. But as days passed, the differences became undeniable. Small patches of green appeared where nothing had dared to sprout. Leaves stretched outward, reaching for the sun, and the soil around the sprouts looked richer, almost alive. Even the most cynical neighbors paused in their routines to stare, curiosity mixing with awe. Ravi worked from dawn to dusk, yet his heart felt lighter. Each day brought progress, not just in the farm but inside him. He understood now that the effort, the patience, the choice to act from kindness, were as vital as the water he poured into the soil. One afternoon, Pranav, the neighboring farmer who had criticized him before, walked to the edge of the fields. He studied the rows, the young sprouts glistening under the sun. Ravi looked up and nodded, offering a faint smile. They're growing, Pranav said slowly, disbelief in his voice. Ravi wiped sweat from his brow. They are. And they'll grow stronger if we care for them. Pranav's eyes softened. You were right, he admitted. Maybe the land does remember. Ravi did not boast. He simply knelt and continued tending the sprouts. He felt a profound sense of connection, to the earth, to the stranger who had guided him, and to the villagers who were slowly opening their minds to the possibility that courage and kindness could shape even a harsh world. Days turned into weeks. More sprouts emerged and the fields began to change. The barren patches shrank as greenery spread tentatively but insistently. Ravi's confidence grew with each new leaf, each fragile stem that refused to surrender to drought. Children from the village began to wander into his fields, curious and cautious. Ravi taught them to tend the plants carefully, showing them how to conserve water and nurture life. In these moments he felt the circle of kindness expanding, not just within his own farm but throughout the community. Even the air seemed different, lighter somehow, as if the land itself acknowledged the patience, courage, and care poured into it. Ravi paused one evening, looking over the green patches that had once been nothing but cracked soil. He realized the stranger had been right. The land remembers those who act with generosity and love. And Ravi, standing among the thriving sprouts, felt a quiet joy, a sense of purpose deeper than he had ever known. The land was responding, yes, but so was he. He had grown alongside the crops, learning that hardship did not have to crush hope, and that even the smallest acts of courage could transform both earth and soul. The village stirred with a quiet buzz that had not been heard in years. Word of Ravi's farm had spread, carried by wandering children and watchful neighbors. The barren fields that once marked the edge of the village were now dotted with patches of green, small but determined, whispering a promise of life even under the relentless sun. Some villagers approached cautiously, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "It can't last," one man muttered, brushing dust from his trousers. "The drought is too strong." Yet, as they stepped closer, even the most doubtful could not ignore the evidence. Tiny sprouts reached toward the sunlight, the soil around them subtly richer, almost as if it remembered the care poured into it. Ravi moved among the plants, tending them with practiced hands, yet he welcomed the villagers who watched. Children followed him eagerly, learning how to dig shallow trenches to conserve water, how to plant seeds with patience, and how to speak to the fragile crops in gentle whispers. Ravi smiled at them, realizing that this simple act, teaching, guiding, sharing, was a new kind of generosity, one that might ripple through generations. A group of villagers gathered near the field's edge, including Pranav, the neighbor who had once called Ravi's choices foolish. He studied the field silently, then turned to the others. Perhaps he was right," he said softly. "If we tend the land with care, it can respond. Even now it's giving back." Slowly, others nodded. They began to share small resources, offering what little water they had, helping to carry tools and teaching one another how to preserve the soil. The village, once fractured by fear and scarcity, began to feel connected in ways it had not for years. Ravi noticed the subtle changes in his neighbors, the cautious envy giving way to cooperation, the whispered criticisms replaced by quiet admiration. He felt a surge of satisfaction, tempered by humility. The transformation was not his alone. It belonged to the village, to the land, and to the unseen thread of kindness that had arrived weeks ago in the form of a stranger. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, a faint breeze carried the memory of the stranger's visit. The villagers returned home, but the lessons remained. Some went to their own plots of land, trying new planting methods, rationing water more carefully, whispering encouragement to the fragile sprouts. Even in homes and small gardens, seeds of change began to grow. One child, inspired by Ravi, carefully watered a patch of vegetables, whispering, "Grow. Survive. I am with you." Ravi stood at the edge of his flourishing field, looking toward the horizon. He had not seen the stranger again, but he felt his presence in the wisdom imparted, in the thriving crops, and in the hearts of the villagers. The man had become more than a visitor. He was now a symbol, a quiet reminder that generosity, patience, and courage could shape the world in ways that were almost invisible yet deeply powerful. The village, once defined by hardship and fear, now hummed with subtle life. People began helping each other, sharing water, tools, and knowledge. Even the harshest parts of the land seemed to soften, responding to the care and attention lavished upon it. Ravi smiled quietly, heart full. The work was not finished. There would always be challenges, but the seed of transformation had been planted. The village had learned that acts of kindness, however small, could inspire others, creating ripples far beyond the moment. And in this shared understanding, hope had taken root. The air hung heavy over the village. A sudden wind swept through the fields, bending the young sprouts and rustling the leaves with urgency. The sun, once relentless and scorching, was now hidden behind thick, dark clouds, and the smell of rain, or perhaps of the earth preparing for a storm, filled the air. Ravi stepped into his fields, heart racing. The crops he had nurtured, the soil he had coaxed back to life, were now at the mercy of forces far beyond his control. He knelt beside a patch of green that had once been lifeless dirt, brushing the leaves gently, whispering encouragement. "Hold on. Survive. I am with you." Villagers began to gather, some with fear, others with curiosity, watching the sky and the trembling crops. They whispered prayers, shouted warnings, or simply stood frozen, unsure how to protect the fragile growth. Then the first drops fell, not gentle rain, but heavy, relentless sheets, turning the cracked soil into mud and threatening to wash away the seedlings. Ravi ran between the rows, digging trenches, holding down the fragile plants, shouting instructions to the villagers. Every hand mattered. Every effort counted. Panic flitted across their faces. "It's too much," one cried. "The crops will be destroyed." Ravi's eyes burned with determination. "No," he shouted. "We cannot give up now. These fields, they remember. Every act of care, every drop of water, every seed we planted, they are alive because we acted with hope." The wind howled, bending the young stalks nearly to the ground, but Ravi moved tirelessly, supported by the villagers. Together, they reinforced the rows, sheltered the sprouts, and whispered encouragement as if the plants themselves could hear their voices. In the midst of chaos, Ravi's mind wandered back to the stranger. He said, "The land remembers kindness, and now I understand. This storm is a test, but the memory of care is stronger than fear." Hours passed like minutes. The storm raged, but Ravi and the villagers refused to yield. By nightfall, the rain slowed, leaving behind a soil that was soft but intact, the seedlings battered but standing. Exhausted and soaked, Ravi knelt in the mud, pressing his hands to the earth. He felt it then, the subtle pulse of life beneath his palms, the quiet acknowledgement of every choice he had made, every act of selflessness he had given to the land. The storm had tested them, tried to undo their efforts, but the memory of hope, patience, and generosity had endured. The villagers gathered silently around him, awe and gratitude shining in their eyes. They saw for the first time the full meaning of Ravi's courage, the way his small acts of kindness had transformed not just his land but their hearts. Pranav stepped forward, voice low and sincere. "Ravi, the land, it truly does remember. And so do we. You showed us how to care even when the world seemed against us." Ravi smiled faintly, rain dripping from his hair, mud caked on his arms. "It is not just me," he said. "It is all of us. The land responds to those who nurture it. And kindness will always leave its mark. Above, the clouds began to break, revealing patches of blue sky and the first golden streaks of sunset. The fields glimmered, wet but vibrant, alive with the promise of growth. Every leaf, every sprout, seemed to shine with a quiet acknowledgement, a memory of care, endurance, and love. Ravi stood slowly, chest heavy but heart full. He looked at the villagers, then at the fields, then at the horizon, where the faint outline of the stranger's path seemed almost visible in the receding storm. A sense of awe and gratitude settled over him. The land had survived, nourished by hope and courage. The lesson was clear: good deeds endure, resilience blossoms from care, and even the harshest trials cannot erase acts of love. The village awoke to a quiet calm, the kind that follows a storm that has tested everything and left the world renewed. Ravi stepped into his fields, breathing in the fresh, earthy scent of rain-soaked soil. The once barren land now glimmered with life. Rows of green stretched toward the horizon, the sprouts tall and strong, leaves glistening with dew. Children ran through the fields, laughing as they helped carry water from the well, guided by the careful lessons Ravi had taught them. Villagers moved among the crops, checking soil, watering carefully, and offering tips to one another. The village no longer felt fractured by scarcity or fear. It had grown into a small, connected community, bonded by effort, hope, and shared responsibility. Ravi knelt among the plants, gently brushing his fingers over the vibrant soil. He could see the transformation. The land had remembered every act of care, every ounce of patience, and every risk of generosity. His farm had become more than survival. It was a symbol of life, resilience, and the enduring power of kindness. Pranav approached, smiling with humility. "I see now," he said softly. "Your courage, your generosity, it wasn't foolish. The land responded because you responded first." Ravi looked up, his eyes meeting Pranav's. "It's not just me. It's all of us. Every small act of care matters. The land remembers, yes, but so do hearts." Villagers began to gather, exchanging glances, nods, and quiet words of admiration. Many had begun emulating Ravi's patience, sharing what little they had, helping one another tend their plots, and teaching their children the value of care and community. Ravi's wife approached, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables from the thriving garden. She placed it beside him and smiled warmly. "You've changed everything," she said. "Not just the land, but everyone here." He took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We all changed it together," he said. "The land, the storm, the stranger who reminded us, it all guided us to this moment." Ravi rose slowly, walking through his fields, feeling the soft soil beneath his feet, the gentle sway of leaves, and the warmth of a community that had learned to nurture as one. Every plant, every seed, seemed alive with gratitude, a living memory of effort and generosity. The stranger never returned, but his presence lingered in subtle ways, in the techniques Ravi had learned, the seeds he had planted, and the belief that kindness and courage could leave lasting marks. Ravi sometimes imagined the man watching from a distance, a quiet smile on his face, pleased that the lessons had taken root. Even the youngest children, when asked why they watered their own gardens carefully, spoke of the land remembering, of the importance of patience and care, echoing the wisdom Ravi had received. The village had internalized the lesson. Compassion was not a fleeting act. It was a legacy, a force that endured beyond fear and hardship. Ravi paused at the edge of his fields as the sun climbed higher, casting long golden rays across the flourishing crops. He bent to press his hands to the soil, a gesture of gratitude and recognition. The land seemed to hum softly beneath him, alive with memory, alive with the quiet joy of growth. A soft breeze whispered through the village, rustling leaves, bending tall stalks, and carrying the unspoken acknowledgement that every act of generosity, every patient choice, and every ounce of courage had left a mark that could never be erased. Ravi smiled faintly, looking toward the horizon. His farm had become a sanctuary of hope, not just for his family but for the entire village. The land had remembered, and in turn, so had the hearts of those who tended it. The sun dipped low, painting the fields in hues of amber and rose. Ravi stood at the edge of his flourishing farm, hands resting lightly on the soil he had nurtured through drought, storm, and uncertainty. The air was still, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and the quiet hum of life. Every leaf, every stalk, every patch of green whispered a story of care, courage, and unwavering kindness. Ravi's mind drifted back through the months, the barren soil, the struggle to survive, the choice to share his precious water with a stranger, the storm that had tested their patience and the slow, steady growth that followed. Each act of generosity, no matter how small, had left an imprint, not just on the land but on the hearts of those around him. The villagers, now working together, shared their knowledge, their labor, and their hope. Children ran through the rows of crops, laughing, learning, and carrying forward the lessons they had absorbed. That kindness is stronger than fear, and patience is a form of courage. Ravi knelt in the soil, closing his eyes for a moment. The land remembers, he thought. And it does. Every act of selflessness, every ounce of care, every whispered word of encouragement had been etched into the earth. But more than that, the people remembered. Hearts had changed. Lives had been touched. Community had been restored. He smiled faintly, feeling the wind stir the leaves around him. It was as if the land itself was alive, quietly acknowledging the choices made by those who had nurtured it, sustained it, and believed in its resilience. Every scar left by hardship had been softened by love. Every barren patch had been reborn through care. Ravi's eyes wandered to the horizon, remembering the stranger who had appeared like a quiet whisper in the midst of hardship. He had never known his name, nor would he likely see him again, yet his presence remained, a reminder that sometimes guidance comes in subtle, unseen ways. A simple act of generosity, a shared cup of water, a kind gesture in the face of scarcity, could ripple far beyond the moment, leaving a legacy invisible to the eye but indelible to the heart. The villagers, now gathering near the edge of the fields, worked in quiet harmony. No longer divided by fear or envy, they shared knowledge, laughed together, and celebrated small successes. Generosity had become a living, breathing force within the village, one that could not be taken away, no matter the trials to come. Ravi stood, brushing soil from his hands, and whispered quietly to the earth, "Thank you, for remembering, for holding on to every act of care, every choice made from the heart, and for teaching us that kindness endures." The sun slipped below the horizon, casting the world in soft twilight. A hush fell over the village, the fields, and the soil itself, as if the land had paused to honor the story that had unfolded upon it. The memory of generosity, courage, and selflessness lingered like a warm glow in every corner of the village, an eternal testament to the quiet power of human compassion. And in that moment, Ravi understood. The land remembers those who give selflessly. So do hearts. So does the world in its quiet, enduring way.